there's so many things.
Yeah, which has been good because it gives me another outlet
Uh,
um, to just talk because otherwise my head will explode. But
Pull over. They're not gonna listen to me.
yep.
Like I'm not a cop. I'm not a highway patrolman. It's like
Yeah.
taking a look and studying zebras. They couldn't tell which zebra they had actually been looking at.
Hey, everybody, this is the Principal School Podcast. It's really good to be back. It's a new school year. Josh and I are back. We're really excited for the Principal School Podcast, where we talk things that they do not teach educational leaders in principal school. So we're here. Good to be back. Josh, how's it going?
Dude, it's so good. Love sparring with you. I'm excited to dig in. We're gonna talk about some controversial stuff.
It's
I don't know
good,
what kind
man.
of
Yeah, it's good.
good.
We've got it.
So that's some stuff we didn't know in principal school.
Absolutely, man. Exciting season coming up. As always, you can follow me at Mike the Principal on Instagram, and you can follow Josh at Schwa Bros 87 on Instagram as well. But we're going to dig into this cell phone conversation.
I'm excited.
Tell me a little bit more about this group that you're working with in Utah, and kind of some of their goals around cell phone.
Yeah, it's a small grassroots group. It's called Focus Beyond Phones. You can find them on Instagram at Focus Beyond Phones, and they've got five reform goals. The primary one is to decrease distraction and then also decrease anxiety and depression related to social media use, to increase peer interaction by decreasing social isolation, which if you've ever walked into a school during lunchtime, in a high school or middle school,
Yep. You
they're all together
understand
there,
social
but they're
isolation.
all,
Yep. Yep.
phones.
For sure.
They want to increase safety, which is actually one of the primary reasons parents give for wanting cell phones at
Yeah.
school is to increase
Absolutely.
safety. But there's a whole lot of stuff we could get into about like if we were in a real dangerous situation where cell phones actually decrease safety. But primarily, it's not just in those high risk situations, but also by decreasing cyberbullying, right?
Yeah.
And reducing the role of phones in like physical fighting. Sometimes you also have phones
Absolutely.
aren't in
Yep.
fight, so it's going to be broadcast on social media.
Sure
But
is.
then also increase teacher retention, and which I think this is a really unique goal, is that by decreasing phones in schools, you'll increase teacher retention because you're creating a better teaching environment.
That is
And
interesting.
so a little grease in the wheels that way. And so it's being run by three really great people. And it's gotten the support of our governor, Spencer Cox, who's recently been making some calls for schools and districts to kind of evaluate the role of cell phones in their schools.
Yep.
But what they're trying to do is just kind of pave the way forward by saying, what is some good common sense approaches that we can take to this? Because we can't not do nothing. It's like we have to do more than what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And so what is the reasonable and most appropriate response to this? Because it does cause issues,
Yeah,
you know.
100%. And I think that's why, like when we talked about topics to kind of kick off this new season of the principal school, we landed on this one because it's super relevant right now. It's garnered national media attention, and it's something that they don't teach you in principal school, right? Like how the hell do you deal with the dilemmas that are revolving around cell phones? I'll tell you, here in Florida, we actually have state statute that Governor DeSantis put in place last school year, and it mostly received positive praise. And which is interesting because it seems like everything that gets rolled out is, it's a fight. But this one seemed to garner a lot of praise, even from many superintendents. We have some of the largest school districts in the country here in Florida, and it was received really well. in terms of having a statutory requirement for students to have their phones off during the entire school.
Right. Well,
You
and
know?
maybe even, sometimes it just takes one person to be willing to say like, "Hey, we're gonna do this, or at least we're
Right.
gonna try it." Someone's got to start
Yep.
before it, because it's kind of like driving an old truck without power steering, you know?
Yeah.
It's the movement and the momentum that it makes it actually possible for you to turn the wheel,
Yeah.
but someone's got to start that
Yep. For
momentum.
sure.
Sometimes that first bit of momentum's gonna be a bit clunky, you
Yeah.
know? But at least now we're talking about it
Yeah. And
rather than
and
just
and there were, we
it's,
had, I think everybody was kind of left to their own devices on, no pun intended, but
I was gonna
or pun
say.
intended. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody was kind of left to, like, do their thing. Which is that how it is currently for you in Utah? Like, districts get
The
to
Wild
just
West, man.
just as,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the Wild West. Yeah.
So like each district is kind of evaluating it on their own, and I
Yep.
know that several districts are kind of mapping out different policies. Sometimes they'll have two or three. Other districts are just trying to kind of ride it out and see what happens, see if it kind of fizzles, dies, But I know there's several schools, like Granger High School, is piloting this year doing bell to bell, and they've kind of identified one way to approach this is by using a product called a Yonder bag,
Yeah.
which
The
essentially the
lockable
kids.
ones.
Right, those lockable ones. And then every teacher has, the little magnetic key that opens it up. So, I mean, if a kid never needs to access it, any adult can open the bag for them, So it's not
Yeah.
like it's going to be possible to access it.
Right.
But they're going from bell to bell. And I had a similar experience in my own classroom that I can tell you about. What the administration and the teachers were saying, because now that the school year has actually started and that this huge experiment has started,
Yeah.
about 2 weeks, it was really itchy, you know. It was new. I'm trying it out, but the kids are actually way more supportive of it now that they've actually experienced it, even though they were really apprehensive. The student body officers were really outspoken about it.
Yeah.
But the teachers are loving it. They're like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen engagement like that. I mean, the older teachers are like, I haven't seen engagement like this in years,
Yeah.
younger teachers are feeling like this is completely different. Like, are these the same kids that I was teaching just a year before?
Yeah.
Because that draw, I mean, the scientists call it brain drain, literally. Like the
Right.
attentional resource phone calls is insane, you know?
Yeah. If you think about that, right? So, like, I think that there's an element of a student that is almost like, oh, you remove this barrier for me, so I don't have to, because there's a draw, right? I mean, there is an addiction component to
Right.
it. I think that's clear in the research. I think, we looked at a couple of different articles to prep for this episode, but I think that
Yeah.
even the Surgeon General and I think it was 42 attorneys general are trying to almost put the warning labels on social media because there is that addiction component to it, and it absolutely can be
Right.
harmful. And I think a lot of the things you've already brought up about, safety components, all those things matter. But I think that the kids probably to some degree are like, oh man, like you've taken this barrier away from me, this temptation that is constant
Right.
throughout the school day.
They've never
Um,
experienced it differently.
right. Yes. For
That's
some of
what the
the,
whole life experience has been,
yeah, it
you
brings
know?
brings clarity. Cause like I think about myself. Like, if I have an unread email, dude, I gotta read it. Like, and if my phone's sitting
Right
there,
now. Right,
like
right, right, right.
like I gotta pick it up. I gotta read what that is, and to not have that draw or that pull
Right.
is probably pretty refreshing from a student perspective, I would think.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so when I was teaching high school, I ran an experiment for my master's thesis that was kind of replicating an experiment that was done in 2015 at the University of Colorado. And it's that 2015 paper has kind of become a really foundational rock of a lot of the people who are kind of trying to find out what the proper role of a cell phone in a
Right.
school is. And what we were taking a look at is practically, what is the actual drain on attentional resources and academic skill that this phone presents, right? And what you're talking about is that draw when you see that email ping come through
Yeah.
is the original reasons we had for banning cell phones as classrooms was to not distract other people, right? It was like
Right.
a social politeness
Right.
thing. You know,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to have your phone ring in a movie theater or whatever. And so to be polite, you wouldn't take out your phone or you'd silence your phone for other people. But what we're finding is that the real distraction is actually for yourself because your body physically is attenuated to the chime or ping of your cell phone
Yeah.
with the same amount of social draw and attentional resources as if someone had called your name
Yeah.
from
Makes total
across.
sense. Makes total
Yeah.
sense.
And
Makes
so your brain is just like, I got to survive. I got to interact with this person because if I don't, then they're going to think I'm mad at them.
right.
And
Yeah.
that,
No, it
that
makes
causes
total
all
sense.
everything on.
And that's a huge issue for a kid, right? I mean, it's an issue for
Well,
adults. I mean,
it's
right,
impossible.
like, I mean, walk into any faculty meeting and you'll see that on full display, right? Like, I
Oh,
mean, it's and to
you'll
be
see.
honest with you, I'm no different in meetings
Right.
as well, right? Like it is. I mean, that's the nature of the beast now, and I got to be vulnerable for it with you for a second because I'm not. I don't know that I'm a fan or in favor of total bans, and I'll tell you, like the part that eats at me, I've always been a technology adopter, right? Like early adopter, as you know, from my time in the classroom to whatever the case may be. I've tried to leverage tools that were accessible to kids to impact or enhance their learning. And I've always seen them as a tool, and I think a cell phone can be that. Um,
Sure.
but the challenge that I think I'm most held back on, Josh, is the fact that like, how do kids ever learn responsible use of the device if we put them in lock bags or we say, look, they've got to be in your book bag from the time you step on campus to the time you leave campus? Like, how do we teach them responsible use? You know, like what happens after their time in K-12 when they get to post-secondary if they've never learned responsible use for how to do that? Like that's I think part of my challenge
Right.
with like wrapping my brain around this.
That was one of the discussions that I had with my one of my thesis advisors, because I think that you're absolutely right in terms of how do we learn how to use this responsibly, right?
Right.
And I think it's more we can't put that burden on the school. It's not the school's job to teach a kid
No.
how to use it. We can do digital citizenship stuff,
Sure.
but I mean, do schools even really teach good citizenship? I mean, where does
Yeah.
that exist? That
Yep.
that exists in the home, that exists in the larger
Yeah.
community, right? So
Yeah.
there are larger pressures at work. And so we need to have those larger discussions as a society of where we're going to go with that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I talked about with my kids, kind of just circling back to this experience that I had, was what happened was when we did each of those tasks, we predictably saw about 10 to 15% drops in accuracy in provide completing tasks.
No doubt.
But if the phone was like accessible to them in their pocket, like on their desk, they couldn't complete any of these tasks greater than like 75% accuracy. Whereas if their phone was away in a backpack or was inaccessible, if we just provided a little bit of that barrier there, they could do any of the tasks for between 94 to 100%
Yep.
accurate. And so what we kind of came to as a class was understanding that removing our cell phone, we need to identify the right time for the right tool in the right place.
Yeah.
And so for the task that we were trying to do in like a language arts context, in terms of like having discussions or sitting and reading a book or doing some of these other things. It didn't call for that tool at that time.
Right.
And so until we needed that tool, we were going to put that tool in the proverbial toolbox. And I wanted to also not make this a power struggle with them and
Yep.
say, hey, like I appreciate being able to communicate with my friends too. How about we do this? And I just bought like a simple calculator caddy. I just put
Yeah.
it up at the room and they could just put in their numbered caddy. And I said, we will get so much more done with these particular academic tasks and this academic game of language arts that we're doing
Right.
if this tool is over here for now. And because we're going to get so much more done, I don't mind giving you 5 minutes at the end of class. Check your phone, get caught up, prepare for the next thing. And then that way you're not rushing through the hallway and trying to catch up there and doing all these things. And I feel like that was a really happy medium that we had collaboratively with the students. And it wasn't until they actually experienced being away from their phone
Yeah. The
that then they could
freedom.
say, oh, this is something that I can notice the difference. And because now I've experienced this, I have more will to actually set it aside so I can experience it again because what they experience is really good.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. No,
and
you're
I love
spot
what you bring it
on.
up. How do we find that happy medium? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, and that's the challenge. Like I was talking about with my wife before, who teaches. She's a middle school teacher here in Orange County, and obviously because we're in Florida, we have the statewide ban. But and she loves it. She said it's made a tremendous impact in her classroom in terms of just allowing kids to focus and taking away some of the distractions, which I completely understand. I think you brought up like three different areas that I think we can just talk a little bit more about, right? Like the social isolation component. There's no question whatsoever that that it definitely isolates kids. If you walk in, like you said, to a cafeteria, you will see, and unfortunately, even at the dinner table, in people's homes or
right?
out at restaurants. I mean, we see it all the time, and it's a definite it's something you almost need to work at to not
Yeah.
I look at my screen time statistics every week to see like where I'm at, so I'm
Right.
not like going overboard, and that's really hard.
Well, okay. So here's a thought. Um, I think essentially kind of what we're talking about is a little bit like PE.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
we expose kids in PE to a bunch of different sports because we want them to work on gross motor skills, fine motor skills, teamwork, and stuff like that. But there are a lot of things that I know that I had experienced in PE, and if I hadn't had that experience with it, I might not have sought it out outside of school,
Right.
right? And so it's kind of like we can give kids a rep or two, right, in understanding ways that this tool can be used that maybe they haven't even been exposed to before.
Right.
And then maybe that can translate out, and that's how we maybe provide a larger impact on like a social scale. Because I
Yep.
mean, like for myself, like it does take work. I've been guilty of having the cell phone at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And
Same. Yep.
I ended up building a drawer in our kitchen with just a power bar in it, and that's where our phone needs to go when we get
Chargeable.
home.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it in there, and I'm just gonna close the drawer because what I've done is I'm just creating one. It's not impossible to get, right? And if I need to, I can see who's calling or whatever. If I need to call somebody, I can go get it. But just putting that one barrier to entry there has
Yeah.
made it so much easier for me to actually focus on my kids and on my spouse at
Yeah.
the same way. Like I keep these guitars out by having them out of their case. I play them
Oh,
way
yeah.
more than I would if they
Absolutely.
were in their case
Yep.
because I just pull it off the wall and then I can put it back.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's such a complex issue, man.
Yeah,
And I
but I
see
mean, it's a great. That's a. I mean that is
that
what we are. That is what we're doing
right.
for kids by implementing these policies and practices, which is, I think we're saying collectively, and I mean, we're just Josh and Mike, but we are saying that I think it's important for there to be a policy in place,
Right.
because there's definite benefit there. The idea that we can retain teachers by putting a cell phone policy in place. I love that because, and it's so true because you're improving teaching conditions, right? Like,
Right now they're kind of declawed, right? Like it's
right,
a
right. That's exactly
constant
right.
fight. You
Yeah,
know, it's like
absolutely.
if someone bugged me the way they were driving on the interstate, and I was like, pull over. They're not gonna listen to me.
Yep.
You know, like I'm not a cop, I'm not a highway patrolman. You know, it's like
Yeah.
a lot of these they know that teachers are a little, there's no teeth to what they can do to hold them accountable. And so they just,
Yeah.
keep using them.
Yeah. And I think the last, the three that you brought up, and I think this definitely resonated in some of the articles that we looked at. Um, and one of the articles was written shortly after the school shooting in Georgia, because it comes to mind because you know uh, on the Appalachia High School incident, but the kids are able to jump on to their phones to contact their loved ones, which is just a crazy thing that's where we're at. But that's where we're at,
Right.
and you know that the safety component of it. I mean, my kids, I have two middle schoolers. They both have cell phones for that reason. If something happens on the bus or they,
Right.
are late for pickup or we're running late, we have the ability to communicate. And I think our parents probably would have done the same for us if we had had that technology. We just didn't. And the safety
That's
component is a challenge, right? Like,
it, I read an interesting article after taking a look at that one about the um, Appalachia High School shooting, and it was an interview with the SWAT captain in Oklahoma, and I think that we can be kind of clear about the fact, like when people talk about, yeah, I want my kid to be safe, we're all talking about school shootings. I mean, honestly, that's
right.
really what it is, right?
Yep.
And it was interesting kind of hearing from the police officers' side of saying, I understand the reasoning behind it. A lot of times it gets in the way because you need to be acting, not on your cell phone.
Right.
And I wish, like, there's so many times I've seen people when I've been responding to something and they're on their phone and I'm like, get out of here. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Uh, Sometimes the cell phones tie up the cell phone towers and make it harder for, 911 responders to respond, for the first responders to even communicate clearly with each other. And so they need to go back to older radio style communication because they can't use the cell towers.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
or what happens is everybody gets on social media and starts live streaming it.
Right.
And
Or
what
you get
they're doing, they're giving
misinformation.
away positions,
Yep.
they're giving away their position.
Yeah.
So there's two sides of this where yes, they can be in contact with their family, they could connect with first responders, they could be, there is an element of safety that comes from having access to that device. On the complexity of that issue is it also presents new challenges
Right.
that can be detrimental to that safety.
Yep.
And we can't just cling to this because it feels good. We need to look at both of those
Yeah.
sides,
You can't discount it for sure.
right? And that's part of what makes this discussion so robust, because there's so many things.
Yeah.
It's like it's hard because I want to have all the benefits of not having them, and I want to have the benefits of having them too. And so, how can I have this cake?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Eat it.
No. And
And
unfortunately we can't.
that's hard,
Like, right.
right?
We can. I think we've outlined that the pros are definitely far outweigh. Um, Having a policy definitely is more beneficial than not having one in place.
The
Um,
start,
yeah,
right?
in some capacity. And I think we're going to see some states and local governments take control of the situation. I think that obviously it's garnered attention on the national level, and
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't even know that it's going to be left to local schools and districts to be able to make those decisions. I think it's going to hopefully, there'd be much larger policy and some deeper conversation about that in general. And I think actually Instagram just rolled out this week new tools for teenagers for their parents to be able to, to kind of, don't worry, you'll be there at some point. You're not there yet, but you will be. But for
Yeah.
their parents to be able to be able to take more control, because there are great. I mean, you and I both use Instagram. It is a great tool, and it can be a great tool. I can see for even a teenage kid,
Mhm.
whether it's crowdsourcing information, and there's a lot of really good elements to it, but there has to be some sense of control and safety there as well. And I think we're going to just continue to see that play out either through government intervention or these organizations kind of taking ownership of it and say, all right, we do really need to do something about this.
Yeah, and I think that in the end, uh, none of this is mean-spirited,
No.
and I think none of this is really motivated by, well, kids today, they didn't have my experience. I mean, who you mentioned just the fact that, as an early adopter of technology, the older generation has always been upset with how the younger generation adopts and uses technology. I mean, I think it
Absolutely.
was I think it was Aristotle used to get mad at his students because of books.
Yeah.
He's if you outsource all of your knowledge to books, you
Let's
won't
keep
know
it here.
anything because you
Yeah.
have it in your head,
Weak
and just
brain.
like, come on, how old is this argument? And
Right.
so I think maybe like a good closing thought here is that Frances Jensen, who's the head of the neuroscience department at the University of Pennsylvania, she said what we're going through right now in terms of cell phones with kids who are under 18, we're just going through a giant experiment. And honestly, the data on the impact of those cell phones is still out, but it's starting to trickle in
Yep.
and it's not super hot.
No.
And if we can't pivot to meet that data in the same way that we like to use data with any other part of what we're doing in
Right.
education, then we are going to get knocked down hard.
Yeah.
And part of being able to pivot to meet that data is just making a little bit of movement with the data that we've got. And the data that we got is that we need to decrease distraction. We need to do something to address anxiety. We need to do something to increase peer interaction. We need to do something to increase safety. And we need to do something to increase teacher retention. And
Yep.
so if we can start making moves in that direction, then I think that we can start actually having that positive impact that we're looking for and find that middle road,
Yeah, no, I really couldn't agree more. This conversation's helped me a little bit. Just kind of wrap my brain around like where we need to be thinking as school leaders. And like we said, like this is our goal of this particular podcast is talk about things that they do not teach you in principal school, and there's not a master's
Well,
program or certification program where they're probably even
right.
talking about cell phones. And these are the realities, these are the challenges that school leaders face. We'll drop in the show notes a link to the Focus Beyond Phones group that you're working with. So if people want to give them a follow on Instagram, they absolutely can do that. So we'll make sure to drop that in the show notes. And then you mentioned just wrote an article on chronic absenteeism.
Yeah,
Can
it
you
was in
give
the
everybody just
principal.
give a high level overview about what that's about, and we'll be sure to connect that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, if you are part of the NAESP, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, 'cause that's I'm working on that level currently. It's in that principal magazine, and really at its crux, if we're looking at reducing chronic absenteeism in schools, the key is in addressing the warmth and human connection that goes into the contact with the family to get the kids to the school. And most schools, they have some kind of form of an automated reminder, like a letter or a postcard or a
Yep.
robocall, but they consistently yield the lowest impact. It's not nothing, but it's like, 2% impact.
Yeah. Well,
But
I
if
don't.
you make a call, or you make a home visit, or you make a personal invitation, kids come,
Yeah.
because they know you know them and they know that you want them there.
We definitely will drop that link because I don't know a school or district that's not trying to address absenteeism in some shape or form. And I think that that's post pandemic, um, just reality that we're all living in some degrees. Not that it's directly connected to pandemic, um, but it is definitely a post pandemic challenge for us for sure in the education setting. But yeah, we'll be sure to drop that in the show notes. Um, Josh and I are going to try to keep up a monthly cadence of new episodes for the Principal School podcast. So be sure to like and subscribe so that you can get notified when we've got new content out. We do have a long list of topics we want to cover. It's just about finding time with Josh in Utah, me in Florida, really just to sit down and have these conversations. But I think they're so critical. So Josh, I appreciate your time as always, man, and sharing your insight.
Mike, always feeling inspired and edified by these conversations with you, man. It's always fun to spar with you.
All right, buddy.